Ha! Hello, hello, hello. So, uh, first off, would you look at that? Hello. Anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Gary. I run the long and short of it. I run a very small TikTok account talking about uh, politics through the lens of someone with autism. I figured I'd start doing this so that I can move some of my base elsewhere in the platform. Uh, and so this is what I'm hopefully going to start regularly doing. I don't know what I'm going to entirely do, but the long and short of it is this is going to keep me doing three things. One, because of my disability, I tend to not focus on my surroundings. And you can see already, even though I use these things on a regular basis, everything's getting kind of chaotic already. I got fucking hair ties because I don't know how well you guys can see it, but I got this. So it's a tradition I've heard in my ancestry to wear your hair out long for a wedding, and I plan on being married sometime this year. So that's that kind of plays hand in hand with that. Hold on, let me move this. I don't like them looking off. That looks a little bit better. But yeah, I don't like that. So I like to kind of keep up with that. I think it's kind of cool, and I actually think it looked pretty cool without with long hair. Hold on, let me actually put my headset down, and I can show you guys. Like, hold on. I don't. I think I actually look pretty cool with long hair. I like this, and once I am said and done and married, I'm just gonna. Yeah, this should be the best. I'm just gonna pick a length, cut it, and then whatever is left is gonna be donated, I guess, to people with leukemia. I don't fucking know. Wherever the hell it goes. If it helps another human being, that's all I care about. Oh, who knows? Maybe if I can't find a place to donate it to, I'll let the birds make a nest out of it. Nature will reclaim these luxurious locks. Oh, let me turn this light on. There we go. Give me a little bit better. I'm mostly lit by the sun, so it's you're not gonna notice much of a difference. But yeah, I think I look pretty good. So I've been keeping my hair long. But of course, when I'm at work, when I'm doing business, so to speak, when I'm focused and need hair out of my mouth, I put my hair up. So I got fucking hair ties all over the place. I promise I'm not becoming Finster. I'm aware of who he is. And quite frankly, I know I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Because no amount of money will convince me to wear pink. Not because I don't think pink is a manly color, but because I don't like pink. Problems are oftentimes surface level. There's your quote for the day. Um, anyways, what else has been going on in my life? My cat, actually, not my cat, my fiance's cat has tapeworms. My fiance's cat is pregnant. He is pregnant. I say that as a joke, but oh god, we have not been. That cat has not heard the end of it. I promise you. He keeps sneaking outside, and you know he hasn't died yet. But I've seen this motherfucker take down everything from like field mice that are like this big, to like adult size nutria. Now hold on. Oh god, I have to go into studio mode now and make a whole nother fucking. Let me see if I can pull up a picture of how much charged. You got 12%. Make my the phone. Maybe it's It is. This one's at 83%. This is so. Hold on. Let me Google. God, why does it always open a new tab? I hate this. We'll just do this. How big is an adult nutria? 15 to 20 pounds. So 20 pounds. That is 5 pounds heavier than the fattest that cat has been. Easily double his size, and this motherfucker is taking them down. I love him to death, but that's probably why he's got tapeworms. How big? Oh, here we go. This'll. I can also provide. So 40 to 60 centimeters. So 2 feet long. 20 pounds. Let me see if we can pull up a good image for you guys. Which one of these is the nutria? I can't tell from a top down. I have to look them right in the face. They look like beavers, and that's kind of what throws people off. Alright, this will be good enough. This is just to get you an idea of what they look like. That is what a nutria looks like, kind of. I know the phone image horrible. I haven't set this up completely. I just wanted to get this up and rolling, so whatever. It will work for now. But yeah. Anyways, so he's got worms, and we're handling that pretty as well as we can. I am not sponsored by Red Bull. I just love their watermelon flavored. Super kind of sour, actually. Not all in all a big fan. Oh wait, not all. I am a big fan. Ugh. This is why I need the caffeine. Anyways. Oh, other thing. If you were, I already mentioned this on my TikTok, but I'll mention it here. Once I find my phone. I've got Duolingo installed. This is where my phone is. I've got Duolingo installed. And so I've been learning German. And, you know, I didn't think I knew that much German. But if I didn't know German, I figured a lot of it out pretty easily. So, like, I'm at the stages where we're learning about, like, learning different noun replacements, essentially. So, Milch for milk, Vater for father, Mutter, Schwester. Yeah. So, we're learning how to order coffee. Again, big fan of coffee. Obviously, you've seen my name tag. So, we're learning how to order coffee and describe the family. And I'm having a fucking... It's easy shit. This is... These guys are acting like I don't know what Danke means. And I'm like... My family's been using Danke, Bitte, Danke Schön. What else? They'll use like the term Kraken as a slur. They've said Fritz, which is, by the way, a derogatory term for like people of America who are Americans. The long and short of it, they never forgave Americans for using trench guns. So, at least they didn't in the late 1930s when my ancestry fled Germany. Anyways. So yeah, having a breeze, fucking loving it. Maybe if it gets to the end of the stream, I'll kind of show you guys just how competent I've become. So far, my biggest complaint, and I mean my biggest, and it's not even that bad, is they want you to talk into the phone, which is horrible for me, who, as a person who regularly, what does that mean? Oh, that's my tripod. As someone who regularly uses Duolingo on occasion in public areas, not always possible. I do try to make it work. So, and that's about it for my day-to-day life, honestly. I work graveyard shifts, so it's still very boring. People aren't really around to bug me at 1 o'clock in the morning. And if I didn't live between the times of 4 a.m. to 9 p.m. for the rest of my life, probably would prefer this. I'm not the biggest fan of people. And I promise it's the autism. I promise. So anyways, I've already read through a decent chunk of this. I've referenced this a bunch in a lot of my other works. And rightfully so. John Locke, every single thing you take for granted, the idea of human rights, anti-authoritarianism, anti-fascism, all of it traces its roots to this guy. And people do not give him enough credit. And because I think he's a valuable resource and someone we all should learn from, this is going to be what I read for you guys. And my hope is to actually get through at least the first treatise of government. Because this guy, whether you want to admit it or not, is foundational. He is the person that separated Americanism from, well, what would become Americanism from literally the rest of the world. He was a paradigm shift by disproportionate levels. So, here's hoping we can get through together. Book 1. The false principles and foundations of Sir Robert Filmer and his followers are detected and overthrown. Chapter 1, the introduction. Oh, and I can see chat, by the way, as I'm reading. I'm keeping it kind of in my peripheral. If you guys want to talk to me, if you've got any questions, do not be afraid to ask. And even when this is done and it's posted as a video, I will be reading comments. I'll be answering questions at essentially my convenience. I'm here as a resource to you guys, not the other way around. Anyways, so we'll start with this. Slavery is so vile and miserable in a state of man, and so directly opposite to the generous temper and courage of our nation, that it is hardly to be conceived that an Englishman, much less a gentleman, should plead for it. And truly, I should have taken Sir Robert Filmer's Patriarcha as any other treatise which would persuade all men that they are slaves, and ought to be so, for such another exercise of wit as was his who write the encomium of Nero, rather than for a serious discourse meant in earnest, had not the gravity of the title and the epistle, the pictures in the front of the book, and the applause that followed it, required me to believe that the author and publisher were both in earnest. Okay, so what is this going over? Let's take this bit by bit, because this is kind of like a long sentence. He outright says, the first part, that slavery is viable. That slavery is vile and miserable. He detests slavery. That should be clear. And the thought that any civilized person would bargain for it, would advocate for it, is not ideal for him. And so any reference, he specifically points out that this is kind of a response to Sir Robert Filmer's work Patriarcha, which I haven't read. and I thought about picking it up, but I don't even know if it's even available, honestly. But from what it sounds like in this book that is being written, the general crux of it is that this person uses the Bible as a means of trying to persuade the British population in the middle of colonialism, by the way, that not only is slavery okay, but that they themselves should have been slaves to the king, and that God endorsed this. So he also goes to then say that this work going forward is just an exercise of not just of wit, not necessarily of pure exercise of logic, but more as a clapback. And even if that is true, again, this is still it's very much criticism instead of replacement. So I don't know what the encomium of Nero is, but we'll work with it rather than pursue. I don't think any of that you need to really know, because he covers it a lot in here. But I therefore took it into my hands with all the expectation, and read it through with all the attention due to a treatise that made such a noise at its coming abroad, and cannot but confess myself mightily surprised that in a book which was to provide chains for all mankind, I should find nothing but a rope of sand, useful perhaps to such whose skill in business it is to raise a dust, and would blind the people, the better to mislead them. But in truth, not of any force to draw those into bondage who have their eyes open and much sense about them, as to consider that chains are but an ill wearing, and how much care soever hath been taken to file and polish them. So what he's essentially saying is that the chains or the analogical chains which bind men to society and to their duties are not all that there is, that they're made of sand, and that people really ought to pay more attention to how decorative it is over how, let's say, what's a good example? He's saying that the arguments are weak by Sir Robert Filmer, and that it's just been decorated and fluffed up to look important while not actually being logically sound. So, if anyone think I take too much liberty in speaking so freely of a man who is the great champion of absolute power and the idol of those who worship it, I beseech them to make this small allowance for once to one who, even after the reading of Sir Robert's book, cannot think himself, as the laws allow him, a free man. And I know no fault it is to do so, unless anyone better skilled in the fate of it than I should have revealed it to him. That this treatise, which is lain dormant so long, was, when it appeared in the world, to carry, by strength of its arguments, all liberty out of it. And that from thenceforth our author's short model was to be the pattern in the mount, and the perfect standard of politics for the future. His system lies in a little compass. It is no more but this, that all government is absolute monarchy, and the ground he builds on is this, that no man is born free. So what he's going over here is that Sir Robert Filmer's argument, when boiled down to its core principles, can be described as the following. every single government has complete control over man. And from this, he then builds onto the idea that no man then is truly born free. So, if no one is free, we all ought to be slaves. And we all are slaves to something. And obviously, John Locke takes issue with this. So, let us further and continue. In this last age, a generation of men has sprung up amongst us that would flatter princes with an opinion that they have a divine right to absolute power. Let the laws by which they are constituted and are to govern, and the conditions under which they enter upon their authority, be what they will, and their engagements to observe them never so well ratified by solemn oaths and promises. So, what they're essentially saying is that he's been alive long enough to have witnessed a generation who are bootlickers, as we would call them now, who would go up to authority with the opinion that this authority was instilled by God and therefore have absolute power and authority. So they pled the loyalties because, again, they think they have a divine right to that power. By solemn oaths and promises. To make way for this doctrine, they have denied mankind a right to natural freedom, whereby they have not only, as much as in them lies, exposed all subjects to the utmost misery of tyranny and oppression, but have also unsettled the titles and shaken the thrones of princes, for they too by these men's systems, except only one, are all born slaves, and by divine right are subject to Adam's right heir, as if they had designed to make war upon all government and subvert the very foundations of human society to serve their present turn. Again, going over this idea that these people are delusional to think that, they exist because the government allows them, long and short of it, and that they are slaves to the government. However, we must believe them upon their own bare words when they tell us we are all born slaves and must continue so. There is no remedy for it. Life and thraldom we entered into together, and can never be quit of the one, till we part with the other. Scripture or reason, I am sure, do not anywhere say so, notwithstanding the noise of divine right, as if divine authority hath subjected us to the unlimited will of another. So, what he's essentially saying is that they tell us we're all born slaves and we must continue so. So what they're saying is that they are born slaves and they should continue to be slaves, and that there's no cure for it. That because you entered into this life a slave in some form, that you must continue life that way into adulthood, I guess. Not entirely sure on the geezer to zoomer translation there, but and he's saying that so he's essentially saying is that you cannot leave a life of slavery without also leaving a life of some other thing. But he thinks that this is a lie, that scripture and or reason, in other words, logic or scripture itself, doesn't support the notion that we are born slaves, that we are born to be under someone else's authority. Essentially, the long and short of it, he thinks that there is nothing in the Bible to support authoritarianism in any rightful sense. an admirable state of mankind, and that which they have not had wit enough to find out till this latter age. For, however, Sir Robert Filmer seems to condemn the novelty of their contrary opinion. Patriarch Part 3. Yet I believe it will be hard for him to find any other age or country in the world but this, which has asserted monarchy to be jure divino. There's a term that we ought to look up. I think I know what it is. I think it's power by religious authority, but let's Google it to just be certain. Just for your guys' sake, for the viewers. So what is jure divino? Divine law. There we go. So, going back to that part. To find any other asserted. So what he's essentially saying is that he believes it'll be hard for Robert Filmer to find a time period or country of the world where it is where monarchy is believed to be the law of God. So this idea is not only new, but he says backed up, and no one has ever thought this in history ever, period, never, period. And he confesses in Patriarch Part 4 that Hayward, Blackwood, Barclay, and others that have bravely vindicated the right of kings in most points never thought of this, but with one consent admitted the natural liberty and equality of mankind. So I think what he's saying here, and this is a think, because keep in mind, this book came out in the 1600s, and we're reading it, and it's we can get the general ideas, we can extrapolate the information, but we're working through this together. What he's essentially saying, I think, is that of the people that Sir Robert Filmer quotes, one of them even admitted in their works that the ideas of natural liberty and equality of mankind, that they should be, that they are important, and that those are the crux of society. All right. By whom this doctrine came at first to be broached and brought in fashion amongst us, and what sad effects it gave rise to, I leave to historians to relate, or to the memory of those who were contemporaries with Sibthorpe and Mannering to recollect. So, what he's saying is that the doctrines that have been talked about thus far, in the historical sense, he's not going to go into it because he's not an expert. And he lists a couple experts who are welcome to weigh their opinion in. My business at present is only to consider what Sir Robert Filmer, who is allowed to have carried this argument farthest, and is supposed to have brought it to perfection, has said in it. For from him, everyone who would be fashionable, as French was at court, has learned, and runs away with this short system of politics. Men are not born free, and therefore could never have liberty to choose either governors or forms of government. Princes have their power absolute and by divine right, for slaves could never have a right to compact or consent. Adam was an absolute monarch, and so are all princes ever since. Alright, so what he's essentially going over here is that even the French, who... What is he saying here? Hold on, let me process this. He was allowed to have carried. So what he's essentially saying is he's focusing on Sir Robert Filmer, who has carried the argument of divine right of power to its farthest. And this was praised as perfection by those in power. Meanwhile, the French, who have a shorter system of politics, have a smaller government, has not gone through with this. No, this would have been before the revolution, I think. So their form of government had a lot more power. And so there must have been someone at the time who made the claim that men are not born free and therefore can never have the liberty to choose governors or forms of government. And then the next part is something that would absolutely rattle everyone's tail feathers today. That because we are all slaves and that none of us are born free, that we have no right to consent. So, because we aren't born free, and we never will be free, we have no right to consent. So anything that happens to us, not our responsibility, not our problems, it all sits in the monarch's head. Therefore, anyone in power can do whatever they want to us. Which, yeah, if you truly do believe that your safety and security is 100% liability of those in power, you would absolutely be right to take that to its logical conclusion and say that, well, then I must not need consent. Whatever happens to me happens, and it's the government's fault if bad things happen to me. And I think this is kind of something that rings true culturally in Europe to this day. Europe has a lot stronger of a government. Their governments are a lot more mobile, a lot more flexible. And I think a lot of that has to do with that understanding that he's talking about there, which is that the citizens of these countries believe still to some extent that they belong to their government to some degree, and therefore if bad thing happens, government could stop, government could solve, government's fault. Which is probably why they have such a stronger sense of things like justice. And if you're talking about more of an Americanism ideology, that doesn't ring true at all. But if culturally speaking, that's the type of government that a people want, I mean, like, I don't like it as an American. I don't like it, but I understand it. You know what I mean? My phone's been going haywire. What's going on? Okay, so let's work through this. So we've gone through that. Now we're at chapter 2 of paternal and regal power. Sir Robert Filmer's great position is that men are not naturally free. So naturally has to be like very well defined here. Naturally, under this context, to the best of my understanding, means even in systems without government. Okay? If there are no government, if you're out in the wilderness, if you're out in nature, they're saying that you are not free. Cool. So Robert Filmer's great position is that men are not naturally free. This is the foundation on which his absolute monarchy stands, and from which it erects itself to a height, that its power is above every power. Caput inter nubula. Okay, we got more Latin, so let's roll with it. Actually, I'd probably be better off just looking it up on my computer. Let's be honest. Okay. Caput. Hold on. What inter nubula? What does that mean? Oh, head in the clouds? Is that what that looks like to be what it means? I never actually Googled this part when I read through it. I just kind of put it in the back burner because I was camping at the time and I didn't have access to the internet. So, um, caput inter nubula. Oh, okay. Head in the clouds. Okay. Head. So caput is head, leader, beginning, life, heading, chapter. Enter, in between, amongst themselves, and nubula is cloudy. So, what he's essentially saying is that that's powers above every power. That the head of the body of government is among the clouds. So, translate this more kind of importantly. And from which erects itself into a height that its powers above every power. High enough to be in the clouds. So high above all earthly and human things that thought can scarce reach it. That promises and oaths which tie the infinite deity cannot confine it. So what they're saying is that the right of regal power is so powerful that it and so divine it matches that of God, which as a religious person, like to me that sounds very like idealistic, but I understand that's more of a recent understanding. Hold on, how did you drift so far low? There we go, that's better. Okay. But if this foundation fails, all his fabric fails with it, and governments must be left again to the old way of being made by contrivance and the consent of men, which is Greek in origin, making use of their reason to unite together into society. To prove this grand position of his, he tells us in part 12, men are born in subjection to their parents, therefore cannot be free. And this authority of parents he calls royal authority. Part 12 and 14, fatherly authority, right of fatherhood. Part 12, part 20. One would have, he also calls it in part 12 and part 20. So what he's essentially saying here is that if you can destroy the argument that God is equal in power, or that the powers of monarchy are equal in power to that of God, and if you can prove that God doesn't endorse this behavior, then you destroy the foundation of the argument and it all just kind of unravels and falls apart. And he uses Sir Robert Filmer uses the argument that men are born in subjection to their parents and therefore cannot be free. So that's essentially saying that because you have parents who have authority over you, you will never be free. You have no authority. You can't choose your own life. You can only choose like within what your parents want. So therefore, the monarchies are like your father, are like your mother, and you must listen to them. Yeah, that's essentially what he's saying. In the Greeks, and this is a correct analysis, the Greeks historically thought that government existed at the consent of those within it, and that if enough people not were neutral but wasn't a fan of the government, the instituted powers, that there would be a revolution, they would be overthrown, the areas would be destabilized, and the government would exist no longer. Anyways, to prove this grand position, he tells us, yep. One would have thought he would, in the beginning of such work as this, on which was to depend on the authority of princes and the obedience of subjects, have told us expressly what that fatherly authority is, have defined it, though not limited it, because in some other treatise of his he tells us it is unlimited and unlimitable. Those, by the way, are qualities of God. So that's where he gets that idea from, that it is equal to God. 1. He should at least have given us such an account of it that we might have had an entire notion of this fatherhood or fatherly authority wherever or whenever it came in our way in his writings. This I expected to have found in the first chapter of his Patriarcha, but instead thereof, having one en passant made his obeisance to the Arcana Imperii in part 5. 2. Made his compliment to the rights of and liberties of this or any other nation, part 6, which he is going presently to null and destroy. And 3. Made his leg to those learned men who did not see so far into the matter as himself, in part 7. He comes to fall on Bellarmine, and in part 8, and by victory over him establishes his fatherly authority beyond any question, Bellarmine being routed by his own confession, in part 11. So he's essentially just, long and short of it, this is a part where you would have to take a highlighter, go through it, but he's picking apart the works of the Patriarcha written by Sir Robert Filmer, using some of the sources that he quotes himself. And he's not presenting so much of an argument, so much as he's pointing out, hey, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense. Today is... And by victory over him establishes his fatherly authority beyond any question. Bellarmine being routed by his own confession, the day is clear got, and there is no more need of any forces, for having done that, I observe not that he states the question, or rallies up any arguments to make good his opinion, but rather tells us the story as he thinks fit, of this strange kind of demurring phantom called the fatherhood, which whoever could catch presently got empire and unlimited absolute power. So what he essentially says is that he uses the argument of fatherhood as a scapegoat, and whoever claims or has fatherhood, quote unquote, has absolute divine power over something. And in the case of a monarchy, and in the case of a prince or a king, has absolute power over the nation. And he doesn't quite like this idea because it's used in in a vague sense. He doesn't describe fatherhood. He just says, "Oh well, it's fatherhood, bro. Don't you know?" Yeah. He assures us how this fatherhood began in Adam, continued its course, and kept the world in order all the time of the patriarchs till the flood, got out of the ark with Noah and his sons, made and supported all the kings of the earth to the captivity of Israelites in Egypt. And then the poor fatherhood was under hatches, till God, by giving the Israelites kings, re-established the ancient and prime right of the lineal succession in paternal government. So what he's essentially saying is that Sir Robert Filmer, his argument makes his proposal stupid, because it would have to assume that God instituted Adam as a king, and all of the lineages that followed that would then have continued, had to continue on to Noah, who was the only survivor of the flood. Well, him and his family. And then would have to be dropped in the Exodus this lineage as they escaped Egypt. But then magically, in the middle of Europe, this lineage picks up again? And he says that makes absolutely no sense. And obviously it does. Why would God reestablish kingship? I understand John Locke's coming. Like, what are you on, my dog? What are you on, bro? What are you on? This is his business from part 12 to part 19, and then obviating an objection and clearing a difficulty or two with one half reason. In part 23, to confirm the natural right of regal power, he ends the first chapter. I hope it is no injury to call a half quotation a half reason. For God says, honor thy father and mother. But our author contents himself with half and leaves out thy mother quote as little serviceable to his purpose, but that of more in another place. So Robert Filmer only quotes half of the verse, which says, honor thy father, and, doesn't dare mention the fact that he also says, honor your mother. And he says that was on purpose. He only quotes half of it because he knows hearing that other part would ruin his argument and destroy all of it and start unraveling his argument from the seams. I think I'll read this last paragraph and then I will call it for this stream. So, I do not think our author so little skilled in the way of writing discourses of this nature, nor so careless of the point in hand, that he, by oversight, commits the fault, that he himself, in this anarchy of a mixed monarchy, in part 239, objects to Mr. Hunton in these words, where first I charge the author, that he hath given us any definition or description of monarchy in general, for by the rules of method he should have first defined. So what he's essentially saying is that because Mr. Hunton didn't describe monarchy, I think, that Sir Robert Hutton was wrong to just insert his own definition. I can't say for certain, but that's what my takeaway is. And by the link rule of method, Sir Robert should have told us what his fatherhood or fatherly authority is before he had told us in whom it was to be found, and talked so much of it. But perhaps Sir Robert found that this fatherly authority, this power of fathers and of kings, for he makes them both by the same, in part 24, would make a very odd and frightful figure, and very disagreeing with what either children imagine of their parents or subjects of their kings, if he should have given us the whole drought together in that gigantic form. He had painted it in his own fancy, and therefore, like a wary physician, when he would have his patient swallow some harsh or corrosive liquor, he mingles it with a large quantity which may dilute it, that the scattered parts may go down with less feeling and cause less aversion. Okay, this is very cool. Because you see this in TikTok politics to this day. Okay? If you were to just say that say something bad, right? And you can take the whole thing and split it up and fluff it up with nice words, people are going to digest that content a lot easier, right? So here's a good example, and this gets kind of oh god, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it on a stream, but it has to do with the Me Too movement. Anyways, the long and short of it is that a lot of people will justify very wrong political opinions by fluffing it up with nice words, right? It as to make the harsh lie easier to digest and easier to swallow and consume. So, and he also accuses Sir Robert Filmer of taking his argument, and I'm trying to figure out the right words for it. He paints the authority that fathers and kings have in his own way, and it's not consistently used throughout the text. The text is being referenced. So I'll leave kind of that where it is. Grab my bookmark. All right, put it over here. I'll leave that right here. I will pick that up. We are on page 8. We actually made it farther than I thought, because I thought I was going to have a lot harder of a time translating, not translating, but, communicating to people more my age the thoughts being conveyed here. So I do want to ask you guys one opinion if you're sticking around to the end, if you're seeing this after it's done. I do also have this microphone, and if you think this sounds moderately better, I will use this when I'm just lounging and not really doing anything and I'm just talking. I'll flail this around. However, then when I go to read or look at content, or I start having to use my hands, then I'll use the fancier microphone. That's only if you guys prefer this one. I've had this one a long time, and it's sad to me that it doesn't get used as much as I'd like it to. So, anyways, I hope you're all having a great day. Text your parents or a brother or sister. Tell them you love them. Believe me, they want to hear it. Stay safe.